Okay, thank you very much. I hope I can wake you up a little bit. If you feel like standing and stretching, please do so. So let me tell you a few words about my journey, and then that will be an introduction to the talk. So up until four and a half years ago, I was in academia. I was doing my postdoctorate research in theoretical physics, and well, I had this passion for about 2 decades for alternative organizations, cooperatives. I founded a couple. And well, I had this kind of like thinking of how do you scale up cooperation. One day, I discovered a white paper. That was the white paper of Vitalik. And I was completely mind blown. And a few months after, I quit academia and dedicated full time to building DAOs. So for the past 4 years, I've been building DAO protocols, DAO technology, DAO platforms. And in this talk, I'll try to summarize my journey, like my lessons from that. So this is my 20 cents about DAOs. Can you see the red ones? Not really. Oh, that's a problem. Can we brighten?
Turn off the light.
No.
Yeah, turn off the light. And actually close that curtain to it a lot.
You want to close the curtain?
Yes.
Cool.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is my 20 cents about DAOs and why we are progressing, and finally I think we are coming to fruition, but we're progressing slowly. So it took some years. So 3 things. There's a need for a governance framework, and we'll discuss that. There's a need for a full DAOstack. Doesn't matter if it's called DAOstack or something else, but there is a need for some sort of full DAOstack. And there's a need for scalable governance protocols. And let's digest that one by one. So firstly, there's a need for a governance framework. What do I mean by that? So first thing first, there is no one governance rule fit all. So many different use cases require different governance protocol. Even sub-organizations of a DAO will require a different governance protocol, and more so, governance protocols are constantly changing. We are constantly finding a better and better governance protocols. There is no such thing as the ultimate one. So you need to have some framework where you can build many different governance protocols, experiment with them, change them, upgrade them. And more so, the smart contracts are very complex, still very complex, and complexity equals vulnerability. So you need to have a governance framework which is very generic, very adaptive, can fit any use case. It's highly modular, right? So that it's as simple as possible, as reusable as possible. And finally, it's easily upgradable. So that is exactly what we've developed, like the core base of the stack, of the DAOstack, which we call ARC, the framework for governance. Now, what do I mean by adaptive, general, and modular? So essentially, it's like everything you can have in mind, but I just want to throw at you some examples so you have something more concrete. So for example, the season structure. What is it, the season structure? So the season structure is basically a mapping for a data set, which is basically the way that the voters vote to a data set, which is the way that the DAO speaks. For example, if I make a proposal and I ask agent to say yes or no, then eventually the DAO spell out yes or no. That will be a decision structure. Light. No. Okay. Yeah. That will be the decision structure binary to binary. Okay. For example, if I ask, let's say that the DAO wants to set a number, whatever that number can be a parameter on a platform. So you can have many different ways to do that. You can have that people propose new numbers. Okay. So that will be a binary to number. So people propose new number, and then agents say yes or no to the new number, and eventually the DAO spells out a number. So this will be a binary to number decision structure. But there can also be a number to number decision structure. So any agent can say the number they think in mind, and let's say that the whole DAO takes some sort of like weighted median and spells out a number. So this will be a number to number decision structure. And so on and so forth. So you can have lists, you can have multiple choices, and you'll see that different use cases require different decision structures. Approval logic. You can have many different approval logic, and we've seen few here in the last couple of days, and I'll show you one another, our unique approval logic. But it can be absolute majority with quorum, it can be relative majority, it can be double approval for reputation holders and token holders, and eventually I'll discuss in more details holographic consensus. Then again, you can have voting power. So we had a lot of discussion over here whether voting power should be attached to some reputation accumulated for contributors, or whether it should be some token holders, or maybe locked or stake token holders, and so on and so forth. So different voting power. And finally, global constraints. Maybe you want a DAO to be able to commit on a limited amount of circulation. Maybe you want to be able to commit to limited burn rate, token holders veto for token economics changes, and so on and so forth. So everything you can have in mind would be in a fully general framework of governance. Now that's how it looks, the basic atomic governance unit in DAOstack, how it looks from the inside. So this is the ARC agency. So what you see over here, these contracts are modules, are bits of logics of, we call them governance schemes, of if this, then that. Okay, so if someone make a proposal, and then a majority of reputation holders say yes, then do such and such as in the proposal. This will be a bit of logic. Now you can write many different bits of logic, and when you configure your new organization, you can just choose, plug and play, which are the logics you want to play with. Then these are the global constraints. You can also shop and say, okay, I want to limit this burn rate, I want to limit that total market cap, total supply, and so on and so forth. So these are the global constraints. You can shop them as well, and then you can have the things that the DAO can do. So you have a token contract. So each DAO has its own token contract. It can print tokens and distribute them. It can have the reputation contract. It can mine reputation to agent. The difference between token and reputation is that, well, twofold. Firstly, reputation is not transferable, but more importantly, reputation is deductible. So just as the DAO can allocate reputation to an agent, the DAO can also take back reputation from an agent, which you cannot do with tokens. And finally, the avatar. The avatar is the face of the DAO. Is basically, if you look at the DAO, ask which address is that, you see the address of the avatar, and that address is another contract, it's the avatar contract, which can speak with the blockchain and basically can do anything else. It can operate any function under any contract in the blockchain. That's the face of the agency. And finally, the controller is just the machinery that connects all these logics together. So, one more thing, there is a full upgradability. So just as you have logic to operate the token contract, or the reputation contract, or the avatar contract, there is also logic to press those three buttons, the red buttons, and this can basically change the governance protocol, so they can update the approved governance schemes, they can update the approved global constraints, and they can transfer ownership altogether of those three contracts to a new controller or a new system. So it's a fully upgradable architecture. So if that is an ARC agency, a DAO will look something like that. I mean, why just having just one? So if you can do anything, in particular your agency can vote in another agency, get reputation in another agency, get maybe some permissions from that agency, and so on and so forth. It doesn't have to be even a tree graph. It can be completely, any directed graph. Okay, so that's the first lesson. We need a governance framework. The second lesson was, well, we actually need the full DAOstack. So this will be pretty short, let me try to explain why. So the first problem is that blockchain is still very hard to work with. I mean, there are many more JavaScript developers than there are Solidity developers, and really good Solidity developers is hard to find, it's complex, it's hard to connect with. Secondly, blockchain is very slow, and I'm not sure if everyone knows that, but it's actually much slow read-wise than it's slow write-wise. So reading from the blockchain is very slow. So essentially you need to have more layers to actually make it easy to build collaborative decision-making applications. So on top of Arc, which is kind of like the heart of the stack, there's ArcJS, which is making everything accessible directly from JavaScript for front-end developers. And then there's ArcDB, which is essentially a caching database layer to make everything readable. Now this is a point of centralization since it's all hosted on our server, but then anyone can take the software and host on their server, so in that sense it's completely centralized. Infra is just a more low-level primitive of governance, which I will discuss right now. Okay, so the third and I think most important lesson is that there is a need for scalable governance protocol. So what do I mean by that? So if we have just a bunch of people looking just at a bunch of issues, well, that's not a big problem. So per issue discussed, likely most of the people will attend that issue, and the result of that voting procedure will reflect the majority, will reflect that DAO. So not a big problem. But what if we have a lot of people attending a lot of issues? So that starts to be complicated, because per issue, there will be just a few that will actually attend that, and well, there are two problems here. Firstly, the most important thing is that they will not really reflect the wish of the entire DAO. So how can you deal with that? So if you set up a threshold for approval, like a quorum, which is very, very high, then your DAO will be not only not scalable, it will not be operational. Most likely you won't be able to proceed with even one proposal. But then, if you're setting your quorum too low, then by definition you're becoming manipulable, so a very small collusion can basically take over the DAO, and more importantly, decisions will not reflect, again, the thinking of the majority. So there will not be generated coherence in that DAO. So for that we've invented this new kind of family of consensus protocol. We call it Holographic Consensus. And the magic in here is that somehow, and I will try to describe that in some details, there is maybe a very long list of agendas for the governance system to attend, but then there is a second layer, which I'll discuss, a prediction layer, which somehow makes navigate the collective attention onto just a few proposals at each given time. And by that, increasing the efficiency and the scalability while maintaining the resiliency of the governance procedure. Okay, so just a few terms just to have in mind. Sorry. So this is the general queue for proposals. So anyone can make a proposal. It just goes into the queue. Now, for sake of resilience, in order to make a successful proposal over here, you need to have absolute majority of approvals. Absolute majority of all reputation holders, whatever your weighting function, if it's token holder, reputation, I will just call it reputation, okay? So you need to have absolute majority for reputation holders saying yes, then you can make execute your proposal. Now that's very resilient by definition, but it's also very slow. Now there's a second queue of proposal, like advanced stage of proposal, in which proposal can be executed by relative majority. Relative majority means that you open the proposal for a certain defined period of time, which is predefined, let's say a week. At the end of that week, there is a decision. So whoever votes on that proposal in that week, if the majority of those who vote, that's why I call it relative majority, say yes, then the proposal will be executed. If the majority will say no, the proposal will be rejected. So now the big question comes up. What are the boosting conditions? We call it boosting. So boosting is basically the action where a proposal goes from that queue, slow, resilient, into that queue, quick, and we want it to be also resilient. So the boosting condition is the following. There is the DAOstack Oracle network. It's a separate network from your governance system. So you may have a DAO over here, it has its own governance system, another DAO over there, it has its own governance system, and so on and so forth. On top of that, there is a meta layer of predictors, the Oracle network of DAOstack, which is basically predictors that are constantly staking gen tokens over the fate of proposals in DAOs. So maybe I look inside a DAO, it's an open organization, I see a proposal, and I can put some gen tokens and say, I believe that that proposal over here is going to pass within that governance system. Or I can also bet against it. So let's see. I can stake over that proposal and say, I think that that proposal, if being boosted, will be approved by that DAO. Now, a proposal is being boosted only if sufficient stake is predicting its success. So that's the criteria, that's the boosting condition. Now, there is a good reason for doing so, because those successful predictors that predicted the success of that proposal and eventually were right, will win some more gen tokens, which you can think of as a cost, as a management cost, like scaling up scaling up your management costs for the DAO. So it's something that DAO need to supply to incentivize predictors. Think about it. If you have 1,000 members, you may have at any point in time here like 1,000 proposals, and you need somehow to screen all of those proposals and put skin in the game and bet that these are good proposals, and by that funnel the attention of the collective. Now, of course, predictors can also bet against that. So I can, once a proposal is being boosted, I can bet that it's not going to pass if I think that's a wrong assessment. And eventually, once boosted, relative majority, finite time again. If majority says yes, then successful predictors over here gain fine. If majority says no, then they are slashed, maybe partially, and the predictors incur loss of stake. Now, almost finally, the bottom line is that local decision making, and that's like the bottom line of this topic of scaling up governance. In order to scale up governance, local decision making, local in the sense of relative majority, is absolutely crucial for scalability of your operation. At the same time, alignment of those decisions with the global opinion is absolutely crucial for sake of resiliency. And the claim is that we have a guarantee of alignment between the local and global opinions, and if you want to have it in one line, in one sentence, I would say that we've generated a crypto-economic incentive game that makes the incentive to discover, signal, and protect from any mismatch between the two. So anytime there is a mismatch between the local process and what people believe to be the global opinion, someone can make profit from that, identifying and protecting that mismatch. Now there is a slightly more rigorous procedure to prove that. Again, prove like as physicists proof, not mathematicians, but I'll skip that, I think due to short of time. Please come to me later with these questions. And let me give you just a few examples. So the first example is the first native interface we've built to the stack. We call it Alchemy. It's currently live on the mainnet. Now, although there is a caching there, it's still a little bit slow. It's slow just to upload. So on a fast computer, it will upload in 5 seconds maybe. But then in a fast internet, in a slow internet, it will take about half a minute. So I can wait half a minute over here. Or I can just also go over there, which is also preloaded. Once it's preloaded, it goes pretty quick. So yeah, let me operate from here. So what you're seeing over here is so this is actually the proposals on stage right now. These are the regular proposals, and these are like the boosted proposals. You can also go to history. You see all of the proposals. This DAO was operated for like I think 3 weeks. So you can see all of the proposals that passed and all the proposals that got rejected. So for example, I don't know, trying out the accountability task force, you can see the proposals, whatever people put as a link to describe the proposals. Right now it's just a Google Doc, just a link. You can see the rate of approval and so on and so forth. You can go back to the proposals. You can, for example, let's see, these are new ones I actually haven't seen yet. Let's see what's a good one. So Genesis DAO community report. So let's see what's going on there. This is actually live right now. There is a community of 70 reputation holders who actually now participate and spend a fund together. So Genesis DAO community reports, a proposal by DAOstack team member Eric Rodriguez, and so on and so forth. You can read about it. And then you can decide that maybe you want to predict that it's going to pass. So you can, for example, place your stake over here. I'm predicting now it's going to pass, and I'm willing to spend 10 Gen tokens on that prediction. That will... Yeah. So... Sorry, mistake. Yeah, I didn't press it. So something doesn't work. Here it is. Oh, a little bit slow internet. Yeah. So you can sign a transaction. Yeah, I won't take you all through all of this process, but basically I just send a transaction, and eventually that I won't confirm twice, and that will basically put the stake. just close that. Similarly, you can make your vote over here. You can go over also here. You can see your account. This is my wallet. This is my holding. This is the holding of the entire DAO, and so on and so forth. And the whole rules that I described to you with the holographic consensus are happening over here. Once enough stake is being put on over a proposal, it is being boosted. Then there is, so for example, right now here in the regular proposal queue, there is a period of time of 21 days. After 21 days, if you haven't been boosted or receiving absolute majority, the proposal being rejected. Once you're being boosted, there is a session of 3 days where people can vote on your proposal, at the end of which a decision is being taken. You can also see these are like the 70 reputation holders that are now participating in the game. It's a pretty wide distribution. We made it just for sake of testing. This is a pilot that is running right now, and this month we are opening 2 more pilots with external players. So maybe just almost to the end. Maybe another example. So DAOstack is a decentralized exchange being launched right now. It's actually already secretly on the mainnet, but it's not yet launched officially. Made by Gnosis. So it's a decentralized exchange that is based on the Dutch auction mechanism. So it guarantees liquidity, but with the pay of time. Everything takes more time. But then DAOstack wanted this decentralized exchange to be fully decentralized. So fully decentralized also means a DAO managing the platform. So we've been built with them a DAO. So just as you see the agency that I described before, there is an agency that is now managing the DAOstack platform, and that DAO basically can do anything that can be done on the platform. So for example, it can update the DEX owner. Right now the DAO is the DEX owner, and it can update itself. It can update the DEX logic. So there is a logic contract over here. It can change the logic, completely change the logic of the platform. It can whitelist tokens. Now anyone can list tokens on the DAOstack, but then only whitelisted tokens generate Magnolia, which is then used for fee reduction. So the DAO is deciding which tokens are legitimate tokens and whitelisting them. It can change some parameters of the platform. It can update the ETHUSD feed used in the platform, and eventually also update the ownership of the ENS. And if you want just some extra bonus, in fact, the token registry used to whitelist token is yet another DAO, which is a universal DAO, not necessarily just for that DAO. It's a different DAO. This is just curating a list of legitimate token. So we call it the legitimate token registry DAO. In some more details, it looks like that. This is the real contract architecture used in the system. The whole thing over here is live on the mainnet, but the only thing missing is the interface. So maybe just to say something about that, I just told you over here that right now this is live, and you can make a proposal. Now notice that over here you can make, well, I have shown you how to make a proposal, but it's just go like that. You're opening a proposal, you give a title or summarize your proposal, you give a URL for like long description, you get the beneficiary, the amount of reputation to reward, and the amount of Ether. Now right now this is very simplistic. You can only ask for reputation and Ether, or whatever token you have in the budget. So that's all we can do with the DAO. So the next version coming up is that basically you are still using the same logic for making proposals and approving them, and holographic consensus and all that, but now you can make a proposal to do anything on the blockchain. And now so that's already working, but now we're building the interface for that anything on the blockchain. As you can imagine, you need an additional interpretation layer. I think Luis mentioned something similar in Aragon. You need an interpretation layer such that the UX can read APIs and say, okay, this operating this function, this contract is actually doing such and such in human language. So we are now building that UI, and with that UI we are expecting to launch the DAOstack DAO in about, don't hold me in numbers, but basically 3, 4, 5 months. That's the expectation. And lastly, lastly, not any details, another project we're now working on is building basically the Liberland DAOs, the DAO that manage the state of Liberland. So now in progress, and we're looking for, there is a long pipeline of a lot of interested projects, and we're looking for projects with already existing users and traction that we can test the assumption of our protocols with the Holographic Consensus, we are arguing that with this kind of protocol, you can basically operate as many proposals as you want. You're essentially transitioning the tension between scale and resiliency into cost. So as long as you can pay cost, the DAO can pay cost, you can stretch up your decision-making capacity indefinitely, and we won't test that on the ground with real use case. Yeah, thank you.
I think we've got time for a few questions. Anyone has any? Yeah.
Regarding the governance functions, I would be super interested to know if you have documentation about it, and is there like a specification so other projects can use those objects? I think this is of huge value to exchange also knowledge in that space to find more functions.
Sure. I mean, right now the documentation is all in the GitHub. You have like a list of modules, and we are constantly building more modules. We're working new project. We're specifying the requirements of the project. It turns like usually 80% of the modules already exist there, and then we write 2 more modules. And yes, it's all in the GitHub, so you can. Well, you still need to understand the architecture, so it's still not that friendly. But essentially, I mean, there is a hacker kit and everything, so it's not that hard. But it's definitely for developers. You can go there and see the different modules, and cook up your own modules and see what exists and what doesn't exist. But yeah, I'm happy to elaborate on that privately.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.